world. This is the Fan and Fanatic Podcast. I'm Parker Gerlecki, a.k.a. the Fan and Fanatic, and with me as always is my broadcast partner,
Dad,
a.k.a. Ryan Gerlecki. I've got a passion for all things sports. So, on the Fan and Fanatic Podcast, we'll talk to anyone and everyone from all over the world of sports who will sit still long enough to answer my questions.
that's right. Now, as a result of complications from severe brain damage at birth, unfortunately, Parker will never be able to physically play sports, but that cannot and has never stopped him from loving everything about sports and dreaming of a career in broadcasting. So each of our guests graciously gives of their time on this podcast to invest in Parker's dream and to help him be part of the sports world he loves so dearly.
Now, let's play ball! Welcome back, Fanatic Addicts. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Dan Mathews. Let's start off by telling us where you're from and where you went to college, Mr. Mathews.
Yeah, so I am currently working at 6A The Fan. I used to work at another station in town, but before that, a station out of the market. And
what station is it?
Out of the market, it was 6A, Sports Radio 610 in Houston is where I used to work at. And I went to a small D3 college in Texas called Texas Lutheran University. Funny enough, where Vern Lundquist went.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, the great Vern Lundquist.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. SEC football.
That's it. You know, it's the original.
What do you do now, Mr. Mathews?
So I am a producer for both the Chuck Oliver Show, which is a regionally syndicated college football show, and then also associate producer on Chuck and Chernoff with Matt Chernoff and Chuck Oliver on the local side in Atlanta. The Chuck Oliver Show is a regionally syndicated college football show, which is on 680 at night, but live it is on across the Southern Sports Today network, which is heard in Mobile, Alabama, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, all throughout the state of Georgia, and also too on the Southern Sports Today app as well. So make sure you download that. And just like the 6A The Fan app, it is free of charge. So you get college football all the time if you want it.
So who's Westy? Because I know that the day that we were visiting the station a few days ago, like the questions for when Chuck's dinner were all about Westy. Who's this Westy dude?
So Westy is Steve West. Westy does a lot of our weekend shows. He also, too, will fill in from time to time. I know that Buck really likes to have him on with them, especially when it was Buck and Kincaid. But also, too, as we're talking right now, he's on with Nick Cellini. And I believe he's going to be on with Cellini for the rest of the week because Domino taking a much-needed vacation time. So, we're going to miss Chris for the time, but Westy is incredibly interesting. He is very unique, and he is definitely a little bit different than most of the radio hosts that we work with here.
Has anyone won Chuck's dinner recently?
So we've had a little bit of a losing streak for the listeners. So, Parker, if you want to try your luck, absolutely, we invite you to try to do so. And, it's been a little bit of a dry stretch. Well, it's been good for Chuck because Chuck's been able to eat pretty well at Arnett's Chop Shop. So good for Chuck. It'd be nice if Chuck and maybe you guys can kind of pass along the message. The producers would like to eat a nice meal as well. And I've always been taught that it's nice to be able to give to people to show that you're appreciative of their work. So. Who knows? Maybe we can be able to hopefully have a nice steak dinner in the future. I don't know.
It's
we'll see.
The quarterbacks buying gifts for their offensive line.
Absolutely, Ryan. Absolutely. You got that right. I mean, you got Dak Prescott years ago buying his offensive line ATVs. Yeah. I'm just asking for a mere
He's asking for a steak.
Yeah, just a decent enough meal every once in a while.
Mr. Mathews, so I know that recently when I visited the station, someone was on a FaceTime call with the Diesel himself, Mr. Shaq O'Neal. Who was that guy on the phone with Mr. O'Neal?
So it was probably Rob Jenners and also Brandon Harper. So they do now the podcast with Robert Ory that is part of the podcast park. And I know that they also, along with John Kincaid, when John Kincaid was here, used to do the Shaquille O'Neal podcast, the Shaq podcast. So
The Shaq cast?
yeah, I believe they call it the Big Podcast. I think that was the name of it, the Big Podcast, because if you've ever seen Shaquille in person, he is massive. So the name definitely fit, especially with the host that the show was centered around. But that would probably be it because Robert Ory and Shaq had some pretty good times together when they played together with that Kobe Bryant guy out in LA back in the early 2000s.
Parker, I got to tell a story. I grew up in Orlando, and when Shaq left Orlando for LA, there was a billboard that was up in Orlando, and they took it down in pieces, and they had everybody or people in Orlando, if you wanted to, could come and write nice messages to Shaquille O'Neal, and they mailed the whole thing out to him in LA after he left us for the bright lights in Hollywood.
Yeah, Shaq doesn't leave a lot of enemies behind him. That's a true testament to him. So obviously, even in the hurt of him no longer wearing a Magic jersey, that's a nice that was a nice gesture for sure.
Can I ask about John Kincaid for a second? I know that one of the popular sports stations in Philadelphia is WIP.
Mm-hmm.
94 or 94 WHIP as they call it, which Hugh Douglas is at right now. You remember Big Hugh from the mornings at 92.9
I do remember Hugh. He's a good guy.
Where's Kincaid at right now? Is he still in Philly?
So he is with the Fanatic, which is the newer of the two. I mean, there's such a thing in radio called heritage stations. Like 680 The Fan is considered to be the heritage sports radio station of Atlanta because they were the first and they've been here the longest. And WIP in Philly, it's the same deal. And that's where I believe the Phillies are on and the Eagles are on up there. He's on the Fanatic, which is, I believe, the Flyers and the Sixers up there. But John, is still a good friend. He's somebody that definitely still keep in contact with. I'll get a text every once in a while from him if I have something ridiculous on social media or vice versa or whatever. But no, he's definitely somebody that we still care very deeply about here, and we miss him a lot. And we're also really happy for him there in Philly. I mean, it's a place that he loves very much, and while he really enjoyed his time here in Atlanta, I know that he's been able to, go back and have some nice reunions with people that he's very close with up there.
So, so back to Shaq for a moment. I know this episode is supposed to be about you, but I'm
not very good about talking about myself, so you're good, buddy. I mean, if we want to talk about anybody else, I can do that for me. But it's your show. I just try to answer them as best I can.
So as you know, my grandfather is my mom's whole side of the family are big time Auburn fans, like die hard, and so so we go to all the Auburn home games, like home football games, or as many as we can. And sure. One weekend, and one of the games, the basketball team was in town playing Texas Southern that Friday night. And I was looking through the roster section of the game program, and I saw a man by the name of Shaquille O'Neal, and I'm like, no way, this is Shaq's son. So I'm like, so fortunately for me, the Texas Southern basketball team was staying at at the hotel that we were staying at. So I got to meet some of the players, and sure enough, it was Shaq's son. So I want to give a shout out to Mr. Shaquille O'Neal.
And he even tried to call his dad right there from the hotel lobby to say hi to Parker. So unfortunately, he didn't pick up. But
okay, next question here: How did you get into broadcasting?
Yeah, so, I grew up playing baseball, and like anybody that plays baseball, you hope that one day you can be able to find your way on a 26-man roster. But like many, that didn't happen. So I wanted to still find a way to still be in the game. And a way that I could still be in the game was broadcasting. And as a matter of fact, got to give a shout out if this gets back to them, to our SID at Texas Lutheran. Tim Clark, I had inquired about, helping out and trying to, just get as much experience as I could. And he was like, how would you like to call games? And I said, oh, wow. That's the ultimate goal. And I guess I've got to try to get experience, one way or another. So I was able to call games. If I wasn't playing baseball anymore, at least try to get that experience. And then I also got an internship at the time. It was a Sporting News radio affiliate in New Braunfels, Texas, which is right in between Austin and San Antonio. And was able to get that experience doing high school football, which, of course, high school football in the state of Texas, it's massive. So, just was able to gain that experience, and just through internships, through experience, through word of mouth, hey, this state championship is looking for somebody to call baseball or to call whatever it might be. And I was able to just kind of put together a demo, and then also too, just through experiences, find out what necessarily I liked or what necessarily I didn't feel like I was as strong at. And also to find what I felt like I was pretty good at. And, it was just a lot of, I would say that a huge part of this business is right place, right time, but also too as well. I mean, you have to have one person that likes you. I think a lot of people look at it as you've got to, be able to have everybody like you. And it's nice, but as long as one person who's in charge of hiring says, hey, I want you to be part of this, then, you're definitely able to find your way. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that.
Speaking of, hold on. Oh no. Speaking of baseball, that was an ugly game last night.
Well, they'd won what, 9 in a row?
9 in a row, yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, it's over the course of 162, you're going to have some of those. It's unfortunate, but, they did exactly what they've done all season long. They fell behind and then still found a way to be able to try to win the game and took it to extras. And, unfortunately, Miles Straw for Cleveland had different designs on what he wanted to have happen at the plate with Sam Hilliard. And then, of course, Cleveland came through with the hit. I mean, they're still very much competitive in the Central, even though the Central is down this year. But no, I mean, this is kind of to the point right now where we're coming up on the All-Star break. So, I think just put together as many wins as possible. I mean, you sweep the Marlins over the weekend, try to see if Michael Soroka can be strong again tonight. And if he can, then you get a road series win, which this time of the year, that's all you can ask for. Sweeps are nice to get, but road series or just series wins in general are what you absolutely want this time of the year. And I know they're going to try to get that tonight. Start a new streak, Parker. Hopefully that's what they're able to do.
Does it count as a series win if you've already won, like if it's a 3-game series and you've already won 2 of the games? Does it count as a series win, or does it only count as a series win once the series is over?
No, I mean,
what I'm saying is, could you say,
yeah.
if you're playing a 3-game series and you've won the first 2, could you say that you've won the series, or could you only say that unless you've until the last game is over?
Yeah, so, you hear Kevin McAlpin all the time say that, the Braves clinched the series win. They were able to clinch the series if it's, like you said, a 3-game series. Then, if they had won last night, they would have clinched the series. And today would have just been a chance for Cleveland to salvage this series. Now the Braves going to try to, pick up a series win, and I don't have the schedule in front of me of where they go next. Don't tell anybody that I don't. But it's that part of the season where, like I said, you get to the All-Star break, and it's a chance to be able to hit pause, regroup, and then get back to it.
Parker, hold on a second. Parker, wait a minute. I want to go back to your beginning in broadcasting, and you mentioned the sports information director at Texas Lutheran just, it said, hey, you want to call games. Had you called anything? Like, how did you get ready for that? How did you, develop the skill necessary to be calling these, college games?
I would say that probably just watching and listening and just kind of, gauging of who do I like? Like, I grew up in Houston, and everybody knows who Milo Hamilton is. Braves fans know who Milo Hamilton is. He's the one who called Hank Aaron's a record-breaking home run. So, he's a broadcast Hall of Famer and was one of the best in all of sports. But I feel like baseball more than any other, excuse me, baseball more than any other sport relies so heavily on the broadcaster themselves, whether that's radio or TV. And, that's something that, you've been able to pick up some things from people, whether it's from the radio side or even the TV side. I mean, I think that that's something that I really just tried to kind of keep in mind. And I haven't gone back to listen to any of my old tapes. I'm sure if I did, I would probably just be like, wow, that's corny, that's cheesy, that's all these different things. But I didn't know any better at the time, So no, it's definitely been a cool thing for sure.
Do you have any advice for me since I want to get into broadcasting?
I would say, like I said, for me, man, is, you've got to be able to be open to really anything in this industry. And, I've got my girlfriend's cousin wants to get into it as well. And I told him, I said, hey, look, pack your patience because it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, unfortunately, for some, they get a chance to be able to do this for a living. Others, they run into a roadblock that they kind of just, deem as being too much to kind of overcome. So I think that persistence, which you have a lot of, Parker, which is a good thing. It's a great thing to have. Persistence is definitely important. And a drive too, as well, which, you absolutely have. And you love sports. And I know that with your grandpa, you love watching games with him. And I know with your dad as well, you love being able to do that as well. So, I would say that both of those things can definitely suit you well, man.
What is your favorite part of your job?
Wow, how long do you have? I think that probably what it really comes back to is the relationships. I would say that the relationships are the number one thing. I mean, you have to work with Hoyt every day. That's definitely a little bit of a bummer, but don't tell him I said that. I'm right here. There he is.
Hey,
Hoyt,
Brian.
There you go. Parker says hi, Hoyt.
Wait, is that Mr. Chuck Oliver talking in the background with Mr. Brian Hoyt?
That's Chernoff. So we are right now recording with Ben Ingram because Ben's a very busy man. So
wait, do you think I can meet Mr. Ben Ingram?
We'll work that out down the road. Ben's getting ready for the game tonight.
Do you would you ask him if he has a little time once we're done? Cause so he can drop on. So I would love to have him on the podcast.
I might be tough today, but we'll definitely try to get you linked up with
Parker,
Ben
we'll
here pretty soon.
But then again, you do know all these guys, so you could get them in a heartbeat, right?
We'll see. You can always do the ask, right? That's again. That's the persistence.
The persistence, right there.
You got it.
I don't mean to be selfish, by the way. I'm not trying to.
No.
And I don't mean
to. That's the persistence, man.
And I don't mean to be like rude with all the side questions, not related to you whatsoever, but related to some other things linked to you, but not close, but not directly related.
No, man. You're good. You're good. No, I mean it's the relationships. I mean that's the number one thing is, we just saw what happened last week at ESPN and it's a real bummer. It's a sad reality of this industry and pretty much most industries now, is that while things can be good, they can also be tough where I've been at places where I've been on both sides of having my job no longer there for me. And then also, too, being one of the survivors that, had somebody else lose their job. And it's tough to see, because people have families. But I think that more than anything, it's the relationships first and the experiences. I mean, there's times in this industry, I feel like that we can probably lose sight of just how cool this job is, right? I mean, last year, for example, 2021, one of the coolest years ever of being able to see a World Series winner and be in a World Series celebration. And then a few short months later, be in frigid, cold Indianapolis, Indiana, to see Georgia break that 40-plus year streak of not winning a national championship. So, there you go. There you go. I mean, just last year.
There went all of his Auburn listeners.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've lost the Auburn crowd. And Tennessee and Florida and a lot of others.
Much to the demoralization of my mother. Because you would think that being an Auburn fan, my grandparents, like my family hates Alabama more than they hate Georgia. But, being Auburn fans in Georgia, they hate Georgia more than they hate Alabama.
That was a tough one for Auburn fans and Tennessee fans, I guess, as well, of who do we want to lose more kind of deal. I mean, that's really the way that those rivalries come down. It's kind of like, Texas and OU playing each other, and A&M just being like, all right, I don't really know who I want to lose more. So
just hope for a stadium collapse.
I mean, maybe, I guess.
Mr. Mathews, do you do anything with the BRN, with the ABRN?
So
the Atlanta Braves Radio Network.
Yeah.
What do you do? What's your position on the ABRN?
So you'll hear Kevin sometimes mention me as being the guy that goes into the clubhouse and will get Snit, get whoever the day's starting pitcher was. And then, usually after games, we get whoever the starting pitcher was and then a star or two position player wise, or maybe, I don't know, like say, for example, let's use the 2021 NLCS. And the way, at the time, rules were a little bit different. They were bringing players to the podium. We were still kind of in the thrills of COVID. But I would have probably had to have guessed that, we would have gotten Eddie Rosario that night. We would have gotten, I can't even remember who the starting pitcher was for the Braves. But then probably after Tyler Matzik came in Game 6 and got those 3 outs that he did, for sure, we would have had to talk to Tyler Matzik, about, what are you thinking coming into that situation and being able to get those outs. So, I think that it's important, to be able to, that's another part of the job you got to have is you got to pay attention to the games. It's not necessarily just hey, plug a microphone in and let them do the work. I mean, it's kind of keeping an eye on, hey, this guy made a great play. I need to ask him, what led into that, kind of deal. So I do that for the Braves Radio Network. Most of my on-air is during college football season when, as a matter of fact, me and Westy do the college football Saturday morning show that is kind of a nice little pairing on the radio with College Game Day. So that's always fun to be able to do. And as a matter of fact, already getting ready for the season. I've already got my preview magazines, and we are latching down plans for SEC and ACC
Parker,
media days now.
Parker, let me ask one. I just want to know your professional opinion. I don't know if Parker shared with this. I'm a huge Florida State fan. My side of the family is Florida State. I'd love to hear what you think. I'm one to stay off the hype train. I don't like hype trains. I don't want to get on them. I'm not ready for that yet. But a lot of people got them up there. What do you think?
Going to be really good at receiver. Going to be really good at quarterback. I got to tell you, the last couple of years in Charlotte at ACC kickoff, I've gotten to talk with Jordan Travis, and as impressive a guy as you'll run into. I mean, even back when they brought both he and Mackenzie Milton to Charlotte for the event, you're thinking to yourself, all right, where does Jordan Travis fit into this? But, he is somebody that kind of has willed this team into being a competitor again. And, you've got to have guys like that if you're going to turn the culture of a program. And Jordan Travis has been able to do that. You get Jared Verse back. Keon Coleman as an addition at receiver. That's pretty huge.
That's huge.
I think that the good news is as well is the ACC is a little down. I mean, Clemson has not been what they've been the past couple of years. Everybody's been waiting on Miami to kind of take that next step, and they just haven't done it. I guess right now that kind of leaves like Pitt and Wake Forest. I mean, I feel like if you're Florida State, you got to be able to overcome those teams and be able to win. And I know that North Carolina's had some decent success with Mac Brown going back, and then NC State, Dave Doran, they've been able to have some good seasons. But I'm a big believer in Mike Norvell. And as a matter of fact, was at the Florida State event here about a couple of months ago. When he was over at the Fox Theater and was with the Battles End Collective, I believe, and the Seminole Boosters there as well. And he's somebody that I think it's been pretty impressive what he was able to do there in building up Florida State. So that first game, I think, is going to be just like last year. I think that it's going to be
That's
huge
right.
for both LSU and for Florida
Yeah.
or Florida State. Wow, Freudian slip there. Sorry, Ryan. Yeah, I know, right? Now have to cut this interview short now, I guess. But for FSU as well. See, you're safe when you just say FSU. But if Florida State's able to win that, then the ACC is very much in play, even though it's a non-conference game.
Yeah.
And we've seen it in the past that these huge non-conference games at the beginning of the season, it's either a springboard or it's a huge mountain to overclimb after if you don't win. Because as we all know, even in the college football playoff era, one loss is about as much as you're willing to concede. LSU last year, just with the kind of run they went on before going into that A&M game, there were people who wondered, well, if they win this game and they win next week against Georgia, can you really, even with 2 losses, keep them out of the college football playoff? But luckily, the committee didn't have to answer that question. Yeah. So we'll see what they've got this year. But I definitely am a huge believer in the team that Mike Norvell's been able to build.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Sorry, Parker.
In one of our previous visits to 680, I found that you had some old roster cards. Is it true that the media gets different roster cards than the ones that come in the programs that the fans get?
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less it's perspective, or I guess it's an educated guess, I guess, because coaches don't want to give any type of information, really. So a lot of times, just like I was shouting out our SID earlier, at these schools, they have SIDs plural who will go to the coaches and their immediate staff and ask about, hey, do you have a 2 deep? And a lot of time it's or maybe or whatever it is. Or in the case of Jim Harbaugh, you don't even get a depth chart. But I mean, it's more or less, it's kind of just an aid of, hey, here's our 2 deep. But more often than not, it's the broadcasters that will get kind of that in-depth, because they'll also have production meetings with the coaches. And the coaches kind of feel like, all right, well, they're partners with the ACC or the SEC. They spend a lot of money, so we want to be able to make sure that our product is represented as best as possible. And you'll see some surprises every once in a while, but more often than not, it's helpful if you cover the team on a daily basis, because even though you have a depth chart, it doesn't necessarily mean that Kirby Smart, just because he has on the page, hey, this guy is the second, inside linebacker, but they're playing somebody else. It's more or less as kind of a guessing game, I guess.
Number one, what is number one on your bucket list of sporting events?
Oh, the Masters. Hands down, the Masters. Absolutely. No, I mean, that is something that's, as a patron, I'd like to go, but the Masters is definitely on that list. I mean, just to be able to walk the grounds, be able to go to the media center, be able to eat as many pimento cheese sandwiches as possible, and then probably to spend way too much on Masters merchandise that I probably don't need. And then my girlfriend would probably give me a lot of crap for buying and saying more T-shirts, more hats. That's what we need. But yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, because like I said, I mean, it would be cool to cover a Super Bowl. I've done a Super Bowl week. That was fun. The college football playoffs, amazing. Final Four, same deal. But the Masters definitely, I think is absolutely on that list. Funny enough, of all the people in this industry that I'm envious of, like whenever they play at Eastlake for the Tour Championship, I see the golf writers and I'm like, you've got the coolest job. Like you get to go to some of the greatest resort places and these great courses, and they're able to, because of golf's relaxed nature, to have a pretty good one-on-one rapport with players and their caddies and their coaches and their equipment people. And it's just, I think it's so cool, I mean, it's not to say that I don't love what I do. I absolutely love it. But if I could make a good living covering golf, I would absolutely jump at the opportunity. It's so cool to watch.
That's right.
So I know that the rosters the rosters that I found from the station were from the University of Georgia. Does Georgia Tech do the same thing with the roster handouts for the media?
Yes. So the schools do give you game notes, which as you hear Ben Ingram in the background with Matt right now, they'll give you game notes, which they do it in the pros as well. And they'll give you that 2 deep depth chart, the flip card. That you can look at and kind of, be as best a roadmap as possible. And, a lot of schools now are going away from traditional programs, so you don't have those as much anymore. And there was always at the end of the season a nice little industrial-sized trash bag that I would have of when they used to do these massive, media guides and everything that they would give you, that I would say, oh, yeah, absolutely going to use this. And I think that schools kind of caught on and said, all right, we don't need to do the phone book media guides anymore. Let's now make it digital. We'll give you a link. You can go to an online portal and you can find it that way. I guess if you want to print anything out, you can do that. But it's definitely a lot more nice that way, because the funny thing is my very first SEC media days was 2013, Hoover, Alabama. And that was back when they would still give you a full box of all 14 school media guides. So you had no choice but to then go to the bell desk and be like, hey, can I get one of those carts? Because, unless, you lifted a lot of weights or, you were a workout warrior, you're probably lifting about 50 pounds of freaking media guides, trying to find your way to your room. And then when you leave, that along with your luggage, trying to hit the road, tough enough. But no, it's definitely a new age. And, it's definitely, I do keep a lot of keepsakes. Like I do have national championship programs. I got the Braves World Series program. I've got that. And I keep telling myself, along with keeping credentials, oh, one day I'll put this together, a nice little thing. And my girlfriend is always saying, when's that day going to come? It's one of those projects that I have in my mind as one that I definitely want to be able to do here in the near future.
Credentials are like the thingies with the lanyard and the card, right?
That's exactly what they are.
Is that the only thing credentials are called? Is that like the only thing that is called a credential, or is it just anything like that?
Well, it's a way to be able to identify you. You want to make sure that you don't have that one Super Bowl where that weirdo got up on the podium and was able to use a credential from like some music festival or something. But yeah, it's a way for them to be able to identify you and to also realize that you are supposed to be there. And I just use my bag for traveling, so I don't know if I have one. But maybe I can send you one or two to, for you to see, or next time you're here, I'll give them to you. But a lot of times too, they have codes on them as well, because one of the things they try to tell you as well on social media is don't ever have your credential visible. It's it'd be kind of tough for somebody to be able to counterfeit it, but that's something that they do worry about with whenever you have your credential on, somebody that could try to impersonate you to try to get in, because these are highly restrictive areas, just because of the amount of people that are there, but also too, different areas of stadiums that they want only a certain amount of people to be in and not a ton of people to be there. And that's what those credentials allow for you to be able to do.
I think that speaks to what you were saying before, like how cool of a job. You have to remember how cool this is. Like you go to things that a limited number of people are allowed to have access to.
It is. Yeah. It's definitely something that, you try to kind of keep that perspective. Absolutely. Of, man, like I'm at like, Georgia, Ohio State last year. The amount of people in this state that would have switched spots with me in a second for that. It's definitely important to be able to keep that perspective for sure.
So Mr. Mathews, you might not know this about me, but I'm a big time collector. And it just so happens that two of those things I collect are program/media guides and media and credentials. So if you're looking for if you want to get you said you had a bunch of
you're my guy.
Media guides and programs that you don't use. I'm your man.
You're my guy. Definitely. I will, as a matter of fact, just whenever going through, and if I find some,
my mom send you. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Dude, you're good. So next time you come in, I'll have some for you.
Cool. So here's our last question on this podcast. We are all sports fanatics. So the last question we ask, as a fan, what do you think is the all-time greatest moment in sports?
My all-time greatest moment?
In your honest opinion, what do you think is the greatest moment in all of sports? Like maybe
wow.
maybe the Maybe I don't know.
Oh man, on the spot.
Maybe
here.
LSU's fake field goal that one year, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I mean, obviously it's kind of a lot of people react differently whenever I say this, but I'm a huge Astros fan, and that was my first love was Astros baseball. So I guess seeing them win the World Series finally was pretty awesome. LSU national championships. I mean, I was along for the ride in 2019 with Joe Burrow. That was pretty awesome, but. I would say kind of getting back to the golf example is Tiger's win in 2019, his win at the Masters in 2019. I mean, it's just everything that people had ever wondered. Is he physically still there? Is he, also, does he still have that drive to be able to win? And I think that it was, if nothing else, it was kind of a next version of Tiger. In terms of, the player, because the players weren't afraid of him anymore. And he wasn't, the same guy that he was when he was winning however many majors in a row and well on his way to breaking Jack's records. So that's the one that at least top of mind sticks out to me, as I just remember being glued to the TV and then having to go to my Apple TV to watch it on the Masters app, because remember they moved the roundup that day because there was such bad weather coming through the area. And, just being able to watch Tiger be able to finish it off and win. And I just remember thinking to myself, it's kind of like, don't get your hopes up, because he's going to, somebody, just because of how good these guys are, somebody's going to catch him. And, if he has to go to a playoff, can he win that playoff? And I just remembered him going on to 18 thinking, wow, this is awesome. He's going to win this. And, I'll always remember that final putt and Jim Nance's call, the return the glory, just as only Jim Nance could do. And then, just being such the professional that he is as a broadcaster, and being able to, kind of lay out and let the patrons in the gallery be able to, kind of fill and tell the rest of the story. That's one that I remember a lot.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Mathews. All right, Fanatics, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of The Fan and Fanatic. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all of your support. Don't forget to follow or subscribe, or whatever your podcast app says to do, and you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For my broadcast partner, Ryan Grelecki, this is Parker Grelecki saying, game, set, match!